This is just a reminder that just because somebody has mental health issues does not mean that they do not deserve our help, our compassion, and our empathy. I want to share the story of the first patient that I worked with when I was an EMT. I did my EMS training in Oakland, California, which is a very heavily gang-populated area. And my first patient that I did on my solo run was a former gang member. If I had seen him on the streets, I would have been terrified. Honestly, approaching him knowing that I was approaching a psychiatric call, I was scared. He was decked head to toe in tattoos. He had multiple tattoos that identified him as a gang member and as a violent criminal and as potentially having murdered someone. So I was nervous, and rightfully so, until I got him in the back of the ambulance and he broke down crying. And I had never in my life seen a grown man cry this hysterically. And I asked him what was going on, and he shared with me that he had been released from prison 3 days prior. He had been in prison since he was 17, and prior to that, he was in juvenile detention from age 14. He was inducted into the gang by his older brothers when he was a very young boy and forced to commit violent acts in order to be a part of the gang. While he was serving his time in prison, he was finally diagnosed with multiple mental health disorders and he was treated for them. But upon his release, he was released with no resources and no access to medication. So after 3 days, he began having hallucinations again, and he was really terrified of his hallucinations. He was begging me to make them stop and begging me to not let him hurt anyone because his hallucinations wanted him to hurt people. And so what he had done was he had gone to 3 hospitals in the area, all of whom turned him away. And then he went to 2 police departments, all of whom turned him away. So when I picked him up, he was sitting in front of that second police department who had turned him away. Now, the hospitals in Oakland were so overwhelmed at the time that when we got to the hospital, they said, "We do not have space for this patient. He is non-emergent and we cannot take him." And I simply could not allow him to go back to the streets. He was terrified. He was alone and nobody else was empathizing with him to help him. And so I spent the next 30 minutes calling every hospital and psychiatric facility in the area to see if anyone could fit space for him. And in the end, we did find a space for him. And I think about him at least once a week, really. This man cried in my arms and thanked me for my kindness. He cried in my arms and called me an angel and said that Jesus had sent me to him to save his life. Now, I am not saying that you should go up to every person who is having a mental break, and I'm not saying that every person should be in a place to help someone who is having mental health issues. What I'm saying is it is important for all of us to remember that even those people who are scaring us because they're screaming on the streets and they're loud and their mental health looks very scary, they still deserve our empathy and our help.